Okay, ceramics, this is part 2 of the air dry clay demonstration. Again, I'm going to go ahead and reference my board over here. In part 1, I just went over the characteristics of air dry clay. I talked about what materials you would need so that you could do a project with air dry clay. That also includes specific tools, which again I'll be referencing in this particular section. And in addition, we went ahead and went over the wedging process with it and how that might be. And then we also started the pinch pot method. Okay, back to the ball of clay. I'm gonna go ahead and just go back to the pinch pot method because it'd be good to recap that since we're doing part 2. Okay, so anyhow, you're going to, again, take the clay and make a ball in your hand. It doesn't have to be fancy, just get it into where it's a sphere, okay? And again, with the pinch pot, you're simply gonna take your thumb, which is probably the best finger to use for this, and you're going to actually stick it in the middle of the ball of clay that you just made. And then while it's still in the middle of the ball of clay, you're gonna go ahead and rotate that ball while your thumb is still in it. And I'm just gonna do this for a little while. I mean, you can take as long as you want on this. The other thing though you wanna keep in mind is that you want to actually pull up on the walls a little bit that you've just now created, and you wanna try and stretch them a bit. And this way you can thin them out and you won't have so much bulk going on with the walls. I would say about 1/4 to 1/2 inch is good. I wouldn't do any more than that or any less. That way you have good even coverage. You can also continue to make the pocket here, your actual little portion that you've opened up. You can actually create more depth. So, and that is just simply by going in, not just with your thumb, but now your other fingers, and just sort of getting it to where it's a little bit deeper and then wider inside. And then this is basically going to give you your container shape, whether you're making a cup, a mug, a pitcher, whatever it's going to end up being, you're essentially going to try and get it shaped. So for time's sake, I'm just gonna get a really basic one going here. This can always be evened out later. And the way that you can even this out is simply by taking a butter knife, and you can actually trim the top if you'd like, or just, again, get it to where everything's even for you. Okay, so this is the pinch pot method. All right, just want to make sure we're clear on that. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this guy over here to the side. I'm also going to go ahead and check off pinch pot method because we are moving on to the next thing. Okay, now I'd like to go over the coil method with you. Very, very important that you see this demonstration as well. The coil method will allow you to create a handle, maybe 2 handles, whatever you like. Your container that's going to either be a cup, a mug, or a pitcher can be as eccentric and wild as you want it to be. So no one says you just have to have 1 handle on it, but really up to you. Okay, so for the coil demo, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the camera here so that you can actually see my surface, okay? I'm gonna move this over with the pinch pot example. Okay. So the coil, what you're going to do is basically, here, I'll show you, I'll try that again. So we're gonna break off a piece of the rest of the clay body that you have here. And you can actually start rolling this in your hands. If you just simply do this motion, you're going to end up with a rather long, thinner piece of clay. The other thing you can do is then set it down on your surface, which again, I have 2 surfaces going. All I told you that you needed was to have some sort of maybe a wooden cutting board, you know, whatever board you can find that is pretty rigid. And then of course you've got your canvas if you have it, and if not, some piece of cloth, maybe again a piece of an old sheet, or possibly an old pillowcase, something like that, that won't take out too much moisture from the clay. Because if you grab a paper towel or just a regular towel, you know, they're built to absorb moisture, and it's just gonna make everything super dry. You want the stuff to stay pretty moist for the most part. Okay, back to the coil. So you can also roll the coil out this way. I like to stay in the middle and not go too much on the edges, unless for some reason they're not very even. Like I have an issue right here where this end is a little bit thicker than this end. So I'm probably going to have to not do too much on this end and then sort of take time to roll this other end out to even it up. So again, I'm placing pressure and weight on the end that I need to thin out a little bit. Okay. All right. So this is a coil. Again, you know, it is better to have it a little bit on the thick side. It depends on what you're making to go on your clay project. I'm gonna go ahead and use another coil that's a little bit thicker. This is the one that I just had previous, and this is the one that I'm gonna go ahead and use to make some kind of a handle for the container body that I already have made. Go ahead and let me move this out of the way so you can see. And so I'm gonna go ahead and continue to roll this out a little bit. Now this is probably good for a handle as far as thickness is concerned. Here, I'm gonna bring this over again. So again, pinch pot handle. Also for your container, guys, I wanna point out that you could use a coil too. But the coil itself would have to be, let me show you this. The coil itself would have to be wrapped into itself, and that could create a bottom for you, okay? And so if you have this to start, you can roll another coil just like this, but a little bit wider, has a little more width, and then you can actually put it on top. However, you would need to score them together, and I haven't quite gone over scoring yet, but I'm gonna get there. So I just wanna point out that you could start off with something like this for the bottom of your container, or you can just, again, just create a pinch pot. Okay, those are your options. All right, so going back to the handle, I'll just go ahead and roll out one more, just because I ended up using this for a demonstration for another bottom. So I'll just roll out some more. So you all should have enough clay to, you know, get a pretty good sized project going. Again, enough for the container body and then for some accessories such as a handle. Okay, now the handle could be round if you want it to be. You know, there's different kinds of handles on these particular objects, but you can also flatten it. So right now, again, it's still very round, just like the coil was when we first started it. But then I can actually take my fingers and I can pinch that roundness down of the coil to where it's now a little more flat. If you guys can see that. A little bit more flat. Of course, I've got my fingerprints in here. Those can always be rubbed out too. Or if you notice with some cups and mugs, things like that, some of them actually have a little place for your thumb. Like there's a purposeful thumbprint in there. But that, of course, is an option. It's just a design idea. Okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and go with a flat handle, and the reason for this is because it's a lot easier to end up attaching to your container, which is gonna bring me into scoring. I'm also going to quickly show you how to make what's called slip, And slip, again, is clay and water, and it's mixed to where it's kind of like a paste, and it essentially acts like a glue is what it does, and it helps aid with the scoring process to keep separate pieces of clay together, so that when this thing ends up drying later on, it doesn't end up separating. Because once all the moisture is gone, which is right now holding things together as far as the clay is concerned, it's just the clay itself at that point. And so that's why you would have already scored and then used a little bit of the more liquefied version of the clay, which is slip, along with it to help everything stay together. Okay, so as I'm forming this handle, I do want to smooth it out. I do want to encourage you to keep some water nearby. Water is another good thing that you can have. And I'm using a clear container just so you guys can see what I have in front of me. I'm gonna go ahead and dip my fingers in, and then I'm gonna just smooth out the handle a little bit. Okay, so again, just smoothing it out so it's not cracking. The clay will crack just because it's being worked and used a lot, and that's essentially what's going on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my knife, and I'm going to just even out the ends of this. And before I do, let me make sure that I know where I want to cut it off. So here's the container. Again, I'll be refining this a little bit. I just wanted to, get the basic shape and started, and then go over the method with you so that I could move on to the handle. But right now, before I cut off the ends, I'm going to see about how much I need to cut off. It would be nice to have a good size handle to grip. So something like this would be good. So again, I've got my fingers where I'm going to be cutting off the excess. Okay, and you could just mark it with your fingernail. You don't have to get too fancy. I just use the butter knife to cut that and put this back over here. And then my other portion, I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. So this is what I'm left with for a handle, which is fine. It's, it's a good size comparatively to the container. Again, if you stretch out your container and make it a little bit bigger, you can have a little larger handle to go with it. Okay. So before I attach this, I want to definitely have spots where I'm going to attach it. So let's talk about the top of the handle. Top of the handle, right here at the end. This will be about the spot where it's going to attach to the container here, okay? And then as far as the bottom part of the handle, it's going to attach to the container right here. So I know that both of these parts that are gonna directly be connected to the container, I know that they need to be scored and they need some slip added to them. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and score. So this is where the fork comes in, the fork that I suggested in the last video that you should have with you. So the fork itself, very easy. You're just going to make like an X type of marking on there. That way you guys can see. And it's also, if those of you that draw and do shading and rendering, it's very similar to a crosshatch. Okay, so that's what you've got going on here. Just score deep enough. You don't have to go through the whole thing completely to where you're starting to tear it, but you don't want to just go really light. You want to definitely put some pressure on it so that these are very apparent. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Just know that I'm doing that as well. Okay. All right, now I've got my handle ready. Okay, it's ready to attach. However, I'm not only scoring what's being attached, but I'm going to score what I'm attaching it to. Okay. So right here, again, at the very top, I'm going to go ahead and get that ready using the fork, and again, using a cross-hatching method. And just enough pressure, not too much, but not too little. Again, it should be real apparent. that you've, you know, made the marks in it. I'm going to do the same thing below because, again, the bottom of the handle needs somewhere to attach to also. Okay. All right. So both of these are scored now and they're ready to go. I'm going to put them off to the side very quickly because I'm going to attach them in a second, but I need to go over slip with you. Okay. So I'm going to mark this off too. All right, we did the coil method, right? We just went over that to create a kind of a handle. I also showed you how to score. Now we're going to look at how to make a slip. Any excess clay you may have already removed, such as maybe a portion of your handle, for example, you know, the part that was just too long to attach, or you can just use an extra little bit of clay that you still have. What you're going to want to do, and I'm just showing you this again in a clear bag so that you can take note of it. There's little pieces of the clay that I've broken up, okay? And I did this because if I don't break them down, they're not going to really mix very well with the water. Just have a big solid piece of clay in the water, it's not really going to allow you to mix it together. So it's a good idea to break these down. Again, if they're a little bit drier, that's fine too. Usually when you make slip with regular clay, you're using dry, crumbly pieces of the clay that don't have much water in it, and of course you're reintroducing water. But in this case, you know, this is the air dry clay, so it is different. It's got some additives in it. And so it's going to take a little bit longer to dry out, unlike regular clay. So if, you know, it's gonna have a little bit of moisture in it, that's fine. You just make do with it. Okay, so what I wanna show you now is I've already got some of this mixed up in here. This right here is some slip that I already started playing around with. But right now I'm gonna go ahead and drop some of those crumbs of clay in here, like so. Okay, and they can be broken up too, because again, I'm going to be using my fork to get this going, so that way it's as even as possible. Okay, I'm just going to grab a little bit more out of my bag here. I don't need to use all of it right now. This is just, again, for the sake of demonstrating to show you how to do this. Okay. All right, so once I have this added into the remaining slip, I'm gonna add a little bit of water. Okay. And then I'm gonna take my fork and I'm gonna go ahead and start stirring this up. Now it's going to be kind of like this, kind of mushy at first. You just have to continue to stir it, kind of get it off the fork and separated, and it'll get consistent. Just add in a little bit of water at a time. You know, the clay will absorb it eventually and it will even out. It just takes a little bit of time. But again, you don't have to have it super liquidy anyway. You know, you could just leave the excess liquid down here. Again, the clay will absorb it eventually, but you can use this paste here. It's a thick paste, and this is what you can use right now to join your handle and container. So I'm gonna go ahead and just set this to the side like so. Again, I've got my scored spot on my pinch pot, and then I have the scored spots on the handle. I'm gonna go ahead and set the handle down. I'm gonna use my hands. I'm gonna take some of this slip paste off, which again is like an extra glue or binder. I'm gonna add it on top here of where I scored on the handle. Okay, so that's good, you know. Just get enough on there, all right? I'm also going to add some to what I'm scoring onto. So remember, you're scoring on what you're adding. You're also putting slip on what you're adding. And you're scoring what you're adding to and putting slip on what you're adding to. So I'll take some more of this here, more of the paste. I'm gonna go ahead and just get it on there, see? Just a little bit. Okay, all right, just like so. Okay, now this is ready to attach, finally, right? Okay, so I'm gonna just press this on here at the top. I'm gonna secure the top first, and again, I'm gonna use my fingers to pinch it together so that it actually is fused. Remember, this scoring is for like traction, kind of like good tires on a road, as opposed to bald tires that are slipping everywhere on the road. You have the traction from the scoring, and then you have the adhesion help from the slip. So now I'm pressing the other part of the handle down here. Okay. At this point too, you can continue to shape, you know, because if your piece looks a little rough, it's okay. You can also you're gonna have to kind of play around with it and experiment yourself. I'm getting you started and guiding you on some tips and things that I know for sure work, but ultimately, anytime you're doing art, you have to just try things on your own, try it for yourself. Okay, all right, so making some adjustments here. And it's not bad, it's pretty teeny tiny, right? That's okay, I can make some adjustments later. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put the fork off to the side. What I'm gonna do too, because I have actually, let me show you this too, the slip, just to keep it, you know, in here. But even if it's separated and the clay and the water aren't completely together, you can always go back and mix it. You know, you'll have time to do all of this. And plus you'll just have some for later. You know, go ahead and put your lid, use a container with a lid in the first place, and then you can just put the lid on it, and that'll also keep it moist, and that way it's not gonna dry out because of air. Okay, I'll put that off to the side. Here's my bowl of water again. Go ahead and dip my fingers in the bowl of water, because you're gonna want to use this to help smooth out the top and any areas of your object that are cracking. You just want to go ahead and smooth those out, because even though this needs to dry eventually, you can actually make the surface nice and smooth before it actually gets to that point. You know, it's good to just do a lot of stuff ahead of time. All right. The other thing you can do too, and I mentioned this during our Zoom meeting, and I've also mentioned this in the actual assignment, is that you can take, let's say this end here of the, what's called the lip. It's the very top of anything you make like this. Again, cup, mug, a pitcher, a vase. This is the lip. And I can actually just use my fingers, and I can pull this. You guys see how I'm pulling this? I can pull it out, and I can make a kind of a spout on it as well. Again, I'm still using water to shape this. And this stuff really likes water, like regular clay that you would use in ceramics. It's actually very water friendly, and it works very similar. So this is really a good choice for everyone to be able to use at home. And here you go, here's a pitcher, right? Kind of a pitcher. It actually looks like something you might put creamer in. It's not quite a gravy boat, but it's something you could put creamer in if you wanted to, hypothetically. Of course, we did talk about how this clay is porous. In fact, you know, if you tried to put water in this right now, it wouldn't really hold it completely. It would start to come out eventually, and even if this thing was super dry, you know, and no moisture in it, and you just put water in it, it's still not really going to hold it very well. So this material is still non-porous, and even after you paint it, if you end up doing that once it's dry, And of course that's optional. Even if you end up painting it, it's still going to be porous. The only way to make it non-porous, and I had talked about this in part 1, after you let it dry for a few days or up to a week, depending on the thickness, you know, I can't really give you an exact time frame for the drying. Again, it just depends on your project. You'll see though. Again, do not back off and let it dry until you're completely done. And I'm going to show you in just a second how to store it, and then that should wrap up the demonstration. Okay, so anyhow, the drying, this is about the time frame, but again, there's no exact science with it. You can paint it, again, optional, but it's still going to be porous. The only way that you can make it non-porous is once you use sealer. The sealer in particular is going to be something like a varnish. So you'd have to actually already have that at your house. Again, the intention is not to have anyone have to go out and buy anything. You're just simply using the clay that I provided for you, and you're using water and some other things to set up the surface to work on, and then also some tools that you have at home for this. If you happen to have paint, cool, and varnish, that's even better, but it's not necessary for the project. Okay, so let's say that I need to take a break now, and I got most of this done. Again, you get done what you get done in little bursts. This goes in steps, but I've gotten this far. However, I'm not done. I still have a lot of smoothing, refining to do. I want to, you know, just straighten out the handle, get that a little bit more intact as far as how it looks. And so this is how you're going to store your project while you're still working on it, okay? So this is if you're not done with your project and you're not ready to let it dry. Okay, so this is how you store it. I'm gonna, again, move the water off to the side. The bowl of water with the slip. What you're going to need, if you have this is cool. If not, you can probably just splash some water on your piece. You could dip your hand in here, which I'll show you in a second. You're going to take your spray bottle, make sure that it's filled with water. Okay, this is something that I mentioned in part 1. So you can spray this down just to keep it moist already. I mean, if you end up having to do it again once you take it out to start working on it again, that's okay too. But this is just before you put it away. Give it a little water just to ensure that there's still a good amount of moisture